Look at this moment. Feel a wave rising within you, not just surprise, but something deeper, an almost irrational irritation. This happens when you encounter a man openly displaying vulnerability, his tears unconcealed, his fear unmasked, or when you face a woman whose uncompromising resolve, her steel will, and her ambition border on what cultural norms label as harshness, bluntness, or even mannishness. This isn't momentary bewilderment or fleeting judgment. It's something far more fundamental. It's an internal trigger, an invisible thread that, like an unseen puppeteer, tugs at your most intimate subconscious beliefs about how things should be, who belongs where in this world, and what is acceptable for a person of a particular gender. This is the boiling point, the pole of irritation, where our deepest, often unconscious expectations about gender roles clash with reality, causing an internal dissonance that makes us want to turn away, to dismiss it. This is not merely social discontent stemming from outdated norms that we supposedly outgrew long ago. It's like a system glitch, a bug in the matrix of self-perception that manifests every time someone's authenticity, their true, unfiltered self, collides head-on with our deeply ingrained gender scripts. We see this glitch not only in furious, anonymous comments beneath news articles about a female leader who is too ambitious, too assertive, or about a man who is not brutal enough, not resilient enough, too emotional. We feel it as a sharp pang in our own bodies, a clenching jaw, tense shoulders, when someone dares to violate these unwritten rules. A wave of irritation, rejection, and at times outright repulsion rises within us, as if someone has invaded our sacred territory of worldviews. And this glitch is not a mistake. It is not an accident. It is a beacon flickering in the darkness of our subconscious. It is a key. It is in this acute, at times unbearable discomfort, this instantaneous, almost reflexive repulsion, that a portal to your true power is hidden. It leads to the part of you that yearns for freedom, but is sealed by centuries of expectations, cultural prescriptions, and personal traumas linked to stereotypes. This is not merely a reaction to the external manifestation of another's personality. It is an echo of an inner conflict where your own suppressed shadow, the part of you that doesn't conform to the ideal gender image, dressed in the guise of the opposite sex, knocks at the door of consciousness, demanding recognition. This is the very signal that your inner anima or animus, being repressed, projects onto the external world, creating this pole of attraction, repulsion. But why does this mechanism operate so flawlessly, with such ruthless precision, forcing us to react so intensely to seemingly harmless manifestations of human nature? Why can the mere thought of male vulnerability, the right to make mistakes, or female aggression, ambition, intuition, or the capacity for cold calculation unleash such a storm within, such an unaccountable, almost instinctive reaction of rejection, or conversely, idealization? To understand this, we must return to the scene of the very first transgression, to where the first unwritten laws were carved about who you should be and who you cannot be. We must explore not only the external, superficial manifestations of these stereotypes, but also their deepest, almost genetic influence on the formation of that invisible shadow that follows us, shaping our reactions, our perception of the world, and ultimately our capacity for wholeness. The irrational impulse that pierces you when reality deviates from the unspoken rules of gender is not just a random malfunction. It's a flickering beacon pointing to the deepest archives of your inner world. We spoke of it as a glitch, an invisible thread stretched between the external world and the map of your soul. But to understand why this thread vibrates with such force, it is necessary to delve into the earliest layers of your self-perception, to the moment when the first shadows began to appear in the pristine clarity of childhood consciousness. Imagine you are a blank slate on which no scripts have yet been written, and then, day after day, through the gazes of parents, the intonations of teachers, the whispers of peers. Through countless stories and books and films, threads of expectation are woven into your soul. For some of you, perhaps it was a moment when sincere vulnerability, expressed in tears or fear, was met not with empathy, but with cold detachment, or worse, ridicule. In that instant, perhaps you first realized that to be strong meant to be impassive, and the right to err was a privilege available only to those who did not bear the burden of masculine or feminine honor. For others, it might have manifested as an unspoken prohibition on ambition, on the healthy, assertive drive necessary to stand up for oneself in the world. Girls might have been taught that a good girl doesn't argue, doesn't demand, doesn't assert herself, that a woman's true strength lies in softness and compliance, not in striving for heights where other rules prevail. And then any spark of inner fire, any urge for self-assertion was perceived as something alien, unfeminine, that should be immediately extinguished so as not to violate an invisible etiquette. And for boys, perhaps you, young explorers of the world, were made to understand that intuition was feminine whims, and emotionality a sign of weakness, unworthy of a future man, that the path to success was paved with logic and dispassionate calculation, not with sensitivity to an inner voice or compassion. Every manifestation of your anima, the capacity for empathy, for deep emotional response, for creative intuition, could have been perceived as a deviation from the prescribed masculine path, as something to be hidden deep inside, suppressed, to conform to the image of a fearless and rational conqueror. Thus, this internal censor was formed, this invisible guardian at the gates of your psyche, cutting off everything that didn't fit within the rigid framework of gender stereotypes. It didn't merely suppress qualities, it branded them as bad, shameful, or dangerous, creating internal zones of exclusion for entire layers of your personality. It is there, in these banished parts, that the energy lies which then manifests as irritation towards those who dare to live contrary to your internal dictates. This is not just projection. It is the echo of a long-standing, unconscious act of self-denial. This internal exile, this unspoken agreement with the outside world about who you should be and who you should not be, forms the basis for many of our unconscious reactions. And in this process of concealment, in this ritual of self-renunciation, we see only the tip of the iceberg. There are more ancient, universal mechanisms that govern how we project our inner conflicts onto the world around us. We discussed how irrational irritation, like a glitch in the matrix of perception, becomes an alarming beacon, pointing to something profound within our psyche. This is not just an emotional outburst, but the echo of an ancient, almost ritualistic act performed within ourselves. Imagine in the consciousness of each of us, there exists an unseen yet influential tribe, a community of traits, qualities, impulses that we have consciously accepted, recognized as ours, worthy of being in the light and manifesting in the world. This is our facade, our mask, our ego ideal. But what happens to those who don't fit into this internal code, this unwritten law of the self, to those who were declared unsuitable, shameful, dangerous, or simply wrong for our gender role? They are banished ruthlessly, often at the tenderest age, when the external voices of parents, teachers, peers, and then the faceless chorus of media convince us that certain parts of our authentic, spontaneous self simply have no right to exist. A boy's vulnerability, his inner tenderness, his right to tears or artistic self-expression, which society labels as unmasculine, or a girl's indomitable will, her ambition, her assertive power, her right to be a leader, which might be condemned as unfeminine or aggressive. All of this, if it doesn't fit within the narrow, sometimes suffocating framework of gender scripts, is sent into exile, into the dark, unlit corners of the psyche, forming the very shadow. These are not merely forgotten qualities. They are living, vibrating energies that were literally erased from the tribe of our conscious ego, cut off from the source of life force. And like exiles, they do not disappear without a trace. They merely await the hour when they can remind us of themselves, manifest, embody, and demand their return, often through other people. Think of it as the energy of an unpaid bill that we stubbornly refuse to settle. Every time we turn away from a part of ourselves, deny its existence, suppress its manifestations, we do not destroy this energy, but merely postpone payment. This psychic energy does not dissolve into nothingness. It accumulates, grows like interest on a forgotten debt that continues to compound in the shadows. And the longer we avoid this internal reckoning, the deeper we drive these exiled parts into the subconscious, the more powerful its manifestation becomes, and the more distorted and painful its forms can be. It breaks through the cracks in our carefully constructed mask, distorts our perception of the world, and, most strikingly, projects onto others. We begin to see in those around us what we cannot or will not see in ourselves, what we once so strenuously expelled from our own inner tribe. This mechanism of projection is not merely a psychological trick. It is a desperate cry from the banished part, striving to be seen, even if it manifests in another's guise. This universal mechanism of projection permeates not only our daily lives, but also the great tragedies of humanity, becoming their driving force. Recall Shakespeare's Othello, a noble warrior whose soul was torn apart by unconquerable jealousy. His suspicions, his inability to trust, his conviction of betrayal, these were not inherent in the innocent Desdemona. She was pure, the embodiment of fidelity. The true source of this destructive, all-consuming force was not external, but deep within the Moor himself, his self-doubt, his fundamental fear of losing control, his own inability to accept his vulnerability and fragility in the face of an all-consuming love that could destroy or change him. He projected onto her his internal chaos, his hidden shadow, his own suppressed fears and aggression, transforming innocence into betrayal within his own tormented consciousness. Desdemona became merely a tragic screen onto which Othello cast his unbearable inner conflicts, his unpaid debts to himself, to the part that feared abandonment and therefore abandoned first. His own anima, distorted and unintegrated, manifested as a destructive force from without. Thus, when we encounter something that causes irrational repulsion within us, be it a man openly demonstrating emotional vulnerability, which seems like weakness to us, or a woman exhibiting uncompromising ambition and resolve, perceived as excessive aggression, we are in essence seeing Othello in the mirror of our own soul. We see an echo of those qualities that were rejected within ourselves under the pressure of gender stereotypes, those aspects of the anima or animus that were repressed into the shadow, into this internal exiled world. And it is precisely these repressed images, these archetypal shadows, that form the peculiar gallery of characters who so painfully strike our deepest yet unconscious chords, resonating like tuning forks with our inner disharmony. For behind every such irritation lies not just a conflict, but a whole palette of archetypal images that, as carriers of our repressed shadow, await their recognition, demanding integration. We have discussed how irrational irritation, like a crack in a mirror, exposes our internal contradictions, signaling a conflict between who we believe ourselves to be and who we could be. This is not mere discomfort. It is a pulsating beacon pointing to the unintegrated aspects of ourself, exiled into the shadow under the pressure of gender prescriptions. But who are these phantoms whose shadows so persistently haunt our peace? Who are these mirrors in which we see not them but ourselves, distorted by our own prohibitions? In the depths of each of our unconscious minds reside archetypal images that, when repressed, become carriers of our negative shadow. They manifest in those who dare to live contrary to our internal, often unconscious, gender scripts. For many men, deeply rooted in the archetypes of the warrior, protector, or provider, the true demon can be the image of the sensitive wanderer or the eternal boy. This is someone who openly displays vulnerability, who cries without shame, who chooses the path of an artist or philosopher instead of the corporate ladder, who doesn't seek to dominate, but rather seeks harmony and inner peace. He lacks aggressive assertiveness, a thirst for power, or a display of physical strength. He may be intuitive, dreamy. His actions might seem illogical or weak from the perspective of traditional masculinity. Irrational disdain for such a man often reveals a suppressed part of one's own anima, yearning for freedom from social expectations, for the right to tenderness, for the absence of the constant need to be strong and unwavering. Or consider the woman, the one who from childhood absorbed the unspoken covenant of softness, fluidity, the role of muse, homemaker, or mother. What figure does her unconscious reject with such fury? Often it is the Iron Lady or the Queen of Swords, a woman who radiates cold rationality, strategic thinking, ambition, and uncompromising resolve. She can be a leader unafraid to make tough decisions, not seeking to please, but focused on results. Her words are sharp, her gaze piercing, her career is her priority. She doesn't seek approval, doesn't play games, doesn't use feminine charm as a tool. Her irritating directness, her capacity for confrontation, and her rejection of traditional feminine emotionality evoke an irrational aversion in many other women, and at times men. Let me tell you a story about such a queen of swords. Let's call her Eleonora. She was the director of a large publishing house known for her sharp mind and absolute intolerance for incompetence. In meetings, she could interrupt anyone who wasted time. Her decisions were precise and ruthless, and her appearance was impeccable and severe without a hint of feminine softness. Many employees, especially women, quietly hated Eleonora. They called her a man in a skirt, a bitch, a soulless careerist. One day during a heated meeting, a young employee, Alexandra, couldn't take it anymore and burst out, "How can you be so unfeeling? You're a woman." Eleonora merely raised an eyebrow, her gaze as cold as steel. "I am not unfeeling, Alexandra. I am effective, and I am not obligated to conform to your ideas of what a woman should be to be successful." It was a moment of pure, distilled irritation. Why? Because Eleonora, without realizing it, was the living embodiment of Alexandra's Animus, that part of her own psyche that craved recognition, power, intellectual freedom, but was suppressed under the burden of being a good girl, not standing out, being feminine. Alexandra, like many others, projected onto Eleonora her own exiled shadow power, her capacity for straightforwardness, for aggression in a good sense of the word, for asserting her interests. In seeing Eleonora, Alexandra was confronting not an external enemy, but her own unlived potential, that which she herself had forbidden. Such demons are not a curse, but rather an encrypted message. They point to the qualities we have banished from our conscious self, making them part of the shadow. The irony is that each of these demons actually carries a distorted reflection of colossal power, a right to which we once denied ourselves, fearing judgment or nonconformity to imposed ideals. In this challenge lies the key to our wholeness, to reclaiming our true power. We discussed the pole of irritation, that irrational discomfort that flares up when we encounter those who dare to be different from what the invisible gender scripts prescribe. We saw how this glitch in the matrix of self-perception points to the parts of ourselves exiled into the shadow, to the suppressed anima in men and the animus in women. But what happens when these banished demons don't just cause irritation, but begin to silently, subtly dictate our lives, undermining the very foundations of our being? Imagine a man raised in a cult of unwavering strength, who was instilled from childhood with the belief men don't cry, men don't complain, men always know what to do. His anima, his inner feminine, responsible for emotional depth, intuition, connection to feelings, was ruthlessly driven into the basement of his soul. Now, when he encounters a sensitive wanderer, a man openly expressing his vulnerability, a wave of irritation rises within him. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. How does his fear of resembling those very demons we've already met force him to make unfavorable life decisions, suppressing his true nature? This man might be a successful businessman whose logic is impeccable and will indomitable, but his career, devoid of intuitive insight and emotional connection to his work, transforms into a cold, sterile mechanism. He is unable to trust his hunches, suppresses any creative impulses, considering them unserious or feminine. In relationships, he might be a reliable but emotionally deaf partner. He is unable to express his true feelings, cannot accept support or show vulnerability, because that would mean being weak, like a woman. His partners feel lonely beside him, and he himself experiences a deep, inexplicable sense of alienation from himself and the world, not realizing that it is his own anima, longing for freedom, knocking from captivity. He could have become a leader, inspiring with his depth, but remains merely an effective manager because he fears being too human. Or take a woman who, from a young age, heard, girls should be nice, compliant, don't stand out, don't argue. The most important thing is to get married and be a good wife. Her animus, her inner masculine part, responsible for logic, ambition, boundary setting, assertive power, was strictly censored. Seeing an iron lady, a woman who boldly pursues her goals, unafraid to be sharp or inconvenient, she feels an inner protest. How does this fear of being like a bitch or a man in a skirt cripple her life? This woman might be talented and intelligent, but at work, she will never ask for a raise, propose her idea, or engage in conflict, even if her rights are violated. It is easier for her to remain in the shadows, to be a good girl, just to avoid appearing too ambitious or aggressive. Her career stagnates. Her potential remains unfulfilled because she fears exhibiting qualities that society has labeled as unfeminine. In relationships, she might be overly compliant, afraid to express her opinions so as not to ruin the relationship. She may attract dominant partners because her own willpower, her ability to assert herself, is locked deep inside. Her life becomes a series of missed opportunities disguised as humility, and deep down, resentment and disappointment accumulate from not living her authentic life. Perhaps some of you are now thinking, but wait, isn't this a call to become those very unpleasant archetypes that cause repulsion? Should we just unleash everything that's hidden, even if it's destructive? No. Shadow integration is not about becoming a caricature of these qualities. It's not about being a spineless, emotional mess or an aggressive, despotic bitch. It's about appropriating the energy of these qualities, gaining access to them, and learning to consciously manage them. It's an alchemical process, taking the raw, unrefined metal, your shadow, and transforming it into gold. Not suppressing it, not unleashing it uncontrollably, but acknowledging, accepting, and integrating those aspects that were exiled. Only then can you choose how to manifest your willpower, your emotional depth, your capacity for self-assertion, rather than being their slave or a victim of fear towards them. Otherwise, you continue to play a role written for you by others' fears, not by your true essence. Sometimes, however, the shadow manifests not only through repulsion and irritation. There's another facet of it, no less insidious, for it hides behind a mask of admiration. When we idealize someone who seems to us to be the embodiment of desired qualities, we can unconsciously give them a part of ourselves, our unrealized potential. In this mirror, not only what we reject is reflected, but also what we idolize without realizing that these are our own, as yet unclaimed gifts. We have already delved into the twilight depths of the psyche, where the whispers of society shape the hidden corners of our self, exiling qualities unsuitable for our gender into the cool embrace of the shadow. We spoke of inner demons whispering of masculine vulnerability or feminine aggression, of those invisible censors that prevent us from spreading our wings and living fully. But the shadow is not only a repository of banished vices and suppressed weaknesses, it also harbors another treasure, often even more carefully hidden, even more insidiously overlooked. This is the golden shadow, an archetypal storehouse of everything magnificent we see in others, but stubbornly refuse to acknowledge as our own. We are prone to admiration. It is a natural human need to find ideals, beacons, benchmarks to emulate. But what happens when our admiration becomes not just pure inspiration, but an insidious act of self-sabotage? When we, like alchemists, are not transforming lead into gold, but giving away our own ready gold to another. In such moments, we project. We see in another person those qualities, that strength, that uniqueness that actually belong to us, but for some reason, often linked to the same gender stereotypes that form our dark shadow, were rejected, suppressed, or simply unnoticed by us. A man who has unconsciously suppressed his intuition, his capacity for empathy, his creative impulse, his feminine Anima qualities may experience a deep, almost mystical admiration for an artist, a poet, or even simply someone who freely expresses their emotions and subtly perceives the world. He may idealize this figure, seeing in them something unattainable, almost divine. But in this moment, he doesn't realize what he so fiercely deifies in another is his own unrealized potential, his own golden shadow, which he has gifted to this idol. He has given away his own ability to feel, to create, to understand without words, instead of claiming it for himself and integrating it into his masculine wholeness. Or a woman who, under pressure from patriarchal norms, learned from childhood to suppress her ambition, her will to power, her capacity for logical analysis, her masculine animus. She may endlessly admire a successful businesswoman, a fearless explorer, or a politician whose determination and strategic thinking seem incredible to her. She will read their biographies, follow their achievements, perhaps even feel a slight, poignant sense of envy, but she doesn't realize that this envy is merely a distorted reflection of her own unrealized power, her own animus, which she left locked in the chest of the golden shadow, giving the keys to her idol. She has given away her own ability to lead, to analyze, to assert herself, instead of unleashing it within herself. This mechanism of admiration projection is the subtlest form of self-sabotage. We are not just admiring, we are alienating a part of our soul, our potential. We live as if in a perpetual reflection, believing that light emanates from others while it flickers deep within us, waiting to be recognized and brought to the surface. Consider for a moment, who is your idol? Not merely someone you respect, but someone whose qualities evoke an almost reverent admiration, perhaps even a slight sense of inadequacy. Who is this person who seems to embody what you feel is missing in yourself? What qualities they display, be they stereotypically masculine or feminine, or perhaps entirely unconventional, make your heart beat faster? And the crucial question, what are your own talents? What unrealized abilities, what dormant aspects of your anima or animus have you unknowingly gifted to this person instead of claiming them for yourself and living them out? This is not just a mind game. It is a call to reclaim your own treasures. True wholeness involves not only reconciling with our shadow demons, but also consciously integrating our golden gifts, which we sometimes generously distribute to the world, unaware that they are inherently ours. This is part of the journey toward achieving your true gender-integrated self. But what if these gifts are not just hidden, but actively rejected by us due to fear. We've discussed irritation, that glitch in the matrix that flares up when reality violates our unspoken gender scripts. We've touched upon the golden shadow, those radiant qualities we idealize in others because we have exiled them from ourselves, believing they are not for us, not for our role, not for our gender. But what if I told you that every such impulse is not a curse, but a map, not a barrier, but a key? Every projection, whether negative shadow or golden, is not a random malfunction, but a carefully crafted message. From your deep psyche, a call for reunification. Allow me to propose a new philosophy to you, not just a concept, but a living principle capable of transforming your very being. It is the philosophy of alchemical return. We have lived in a world where we were prescribed to cut off, suppress, and exile and to shadow those parts of ourselves that did not fit into rigid gender frameworks. For men, vulnerability, tears, intuition. For women, ambition, aggression, cold logic. And now we encounter these qualities in others, and they either infuriate us to the core or evoke reverent adoration. But in this new philosophy, we do not turn away from these projections. On the contrary, we turn towards them like lost children awaiting their return home. Imagine your entire life as a grand, unfinished tapestry. Each thread is a quality, a character trait, society, upbringing, the fear of rejection. These are the scissors, mercilessly cutting threads that don't fit the correct pattern. And so you look at someone else's tapestry and see those forbidden threads there, a vibrant red thread of passion that was denied to you, or a deep blue thread of calm that you considered a weakness. Irritation is the pain of losing these threads. Idealization is the longing for them. A practical tool for alchemical return, the mirror of reintegration. I propose an exercise I call the mirror of reintegration. It is simple, yet requires sincerity and courage. Over the next week, each time you feel a strong, irrational irritation towards someone, or conversely, excessive, almost unhealthy admiration, pause. Do not reject this feeling. Instead, accept it as a signal. 1. Identifying the projection. Ask yourself, what specific quality in this person elicits such a strong reaction from me? Is it a woman's ambition or a man's vulnerability? Is it her decisiveness, or his gentleness? Name this quality as precisely as possible. 2. The gender filter. Now ask the next question. Is this quality something that society or my upbringing deemed inappropriate for my gender? Was I ever told directly or indirectly that men shouldn't be this way or women shouldn't be that way? Factor 3. Internal search. If the answer is yes, proceed to the most crucial step. Close your eyes and ask yourself, where does this quality reside within me? When and why did I decide I couldn't be this way? Where did I hide or suppress this part of myself? You might uncover childhood memories, painful situations where you were judged or ridiculed for expressing this trait. 4. Alchemical integration. And finally, most importantly, Bhakta, how can I today, right now, take even one small step to reclaim this part of myself? How can I allow this thread to weave back into my tapestry? If you are a man and are irritated by vulnerability, try today to sincerely admit your fatigue or doubt to someone you trust. If you are a woman and admire ambition, take one small but decisive step today towards a goal you've been postponing, fearing you might appear too assertive. This could be anything: allowing yourself to cry, even if you are a man; voicing your opinion in a meeting, even if you are a woman; standing up for yourself, even if you were taught to be agreeable; showing compassion, even if you were taught to be strong. By doing this, you are not just working with the shadow, you are literally rewriting your internal code, restoring your wholeness. You cease to be a fragment imposed by the outside world and become a whole, multifaceted being. You reassemble your tapestry, but no longer according to external templates, rather according to your true, deep pattern. And when you begin to gather these scattered threads, you will discover something astonishing. Your relationship with the world will change. People who once irritated you will cease to be catalysts of pain and will simply become people. Those you idealized will become a source of inspiration, not an unattainable ideal. You will free yourself from the power of projections, and this liberation will open doors to a completely new level of interaction, not with the phantoms of your shadow, but with the authentic souls of other people. For when the mirror ceases to be a battlefield for your internal conflicts, it can finally reflect something else, something that lies beyond gender roles and social masks.